We really appreciated that you're with us today. Let me ask you first, because it's a current event, I have to start with that. What's your take on the current unrest that we see across some cities inside the United States?
Well, as with many problems, the federal government is the one who created it through being where they shouldn't be. In fact, a lot of people ask me why I'm a libertarian or why I'm running for office. And I tell them it's because government is too big, too nosy, too intrusive, and they often hurt the people they're trying to help. So here's another example. What we have is we have the government, the federal government, militarizing local police departments by giving them tanks, anti-military equipment, money, training. And if you think about it, how many of these police departments, if they had a referendum, if they asked the people, okay, do you want your taxes raised so that we can buy military equipment, so we can buy a tank? How many people would say, yes, I want my local police department to own a tank? Most people would probably say, no, I'd rather have the money go to a local high school or, building a new grade school, whatever. So what we have is the government forcibly takes the money away from people, and then they go back to police departments and they say, hey, would you like a free tank? Would you like free training? And of course, people hear the word free and they say, yes, that would be great. But it's not free because the money was taken from them. But of course, if they don't take it, then they feel like, well, then other people are going to get it instead of me. So if the government hadn't funded all of this military equipment to begin with, then we wouldn't have this kind of us versus them.
That's a very valid point and question, and it's very debatable. But at the same time, you see the rise of this protest. Some of it has nothing to do with, civil dissident or just, peaceful objection to something. Some of it looks like a very different wave of infiltration. So at the same time, while I'm taking your valid point about the, less and less government and less federal government influence, what would be your take as a libertarian presidential candidate on this kind of infiltration that we might see in some of this unrest?
Right. And let me mention, as a scientist, I understand that there's never one cause. So, and that's something that a lot of people mistakenly think, is that because of training, the police aren't doing a good job, or because of this one other thing. And I don't mean to suggest it's one other thing. I'm looking at what the federal government did that directly helped lead to this. Because, keep in mind, the federal government needs to stay at a federal level, and there are a lot of local issues. Now, the other thing that I can say led to it that was a little more long-term or a little more also indirect, is there are a lot of people pointing towards racism for this. Now, we don't know that it's racism. We don't know what was in the officer's head. Other people are saying, no, it's not racism. But many people say there appears to be a racist element, rather. And if we look, the federal government basically made laws, institutionalized racism that caused the problem to begin with.
Thank you. Libertarian Party has a great stance on privacy of the citizens in their communication. What would be your take on, whistleblowers? For example, someone like Snowden, who's still outside.
Oh, I say whistleblowers are not just a valid, it's not just only an okay idea to have whistleblowers. They're essential. They're crucial for keeping the government in line. And I've often said that on my first day in office, I would pardon Edward Snowden as well as a lot of other people. We need to get We need to release Julian Assange. We need to Chelsea Manning, the whole list. We need to have people keeping an eye on the government, because if we don't, then the government just continues to get more force in areas where it shouldn't.
Absolutely. Just a quick follow-up on that. I know what you mean when you say, the whistleblowers are very essential and important. At the same time, what's that line that they can remain whistleblower, but at the same time not to do something that would be perceived as a harm to national security or national interest?
Well, there would be too many cases to really bring it up, but I think the word that you used is good, harm. Of course, we don't want somebody to steal secrets or sell secrets. We don't want our submarine to be exposed to where another country could blow it up. So, yeah, I think harm, I think your use of the word harm is a good one.
Thank you. I would like to go through another issue for you as a presidential candidate. The war on drugs. This is something that we are dealing for a long time, and we haven't seen much of a difference in the outcome. What would be your take and view on this?
You mean on the drug laws?
Correct.
Yes. I would say we need to end the drug war, and we need to have a drug peace. That the drug laws are actually causing more problems than the drugs themselves. Now, does that mean that drugs don't cause any problems at all? No, of course not. If we look at alcohol, half a million people die every year. Tobacco, again, another killer. But the crucial thing here is, what about the innocent people? What about areas outside of health? What we have right now is we have drug prohibition causing the same problems it caused back in when we had alcohol prohibition. And I often ask people, how many times have you heard of an alcohol store, a liquor store owner on a school playground or in the hallways of a high school trying to sell gin to the students? How many times have you heard of people breaking into somebody's home to steal stuff so they can support their vodka habit? You don't hear about that because it's legal. So why not do the same thing with regular drugs?
As a presidential candidate, I want to ask, what is the top priority for you in this campaign?
So I actually have three. Number one, I would like to bring the troops home and turn America into one giant Switzerland, armed and neutral. By meddling all around the world, by being the world's police force, we are causing more problems than we're solving. And the irony here is that the military is supposed to keep us more safe, and what it's doing is keeping us less safe. Another thing is healthcare. If there's one message I could get to every American in this country, it would be that we do not have a free market system. If you look at politicians, if you read the media, you hear people saying, well, look, the free market didn't work in drugs, so we have to have a single payer system. And a single payer system is the wrong way to go. What we need is, we do need the free market that we haven't really had since World War II. And in fact, I like to point out that the two fields within the health industry that are the most free market, now they're not completely free market, but they're the most free market, would be cosmetic surgeons and LASIK surgeons. And the reason they're more free market is that the insurance companies don't pay for them. So people pay for that with their own money. And that means that the doctors have to compete. The doctors have to offer better quality and lower price. And that's exactly what they have to do. So I would like to see knee surgeons and heart surgeons and everybody else, family doctors, I would like to see them compete. Car dealerships and computer dealers, they have to offer the best price for the best quality. And so I would like to see that in healthcare, and then we would see prices go down. And also, I'd like to add that if you look at Singapore or the state of Indiana, which have instituted programs in which people are spending their own money, we've seen costs plummet. In fact, in Indiana, and I think this is remarkable, a lot of people say, well, we need to, people should use generic drugs because they're cheaper. However, very few people do. And the reason they don't is they're not spending their own money. There is no free market. So in Indiana, when they instituted a program in which you got to choose, and if you got to save money, you got to keep it, then what we saw was there used to be about maybe 10%, 90%. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I said that correct the first time. 10% of the people were using generic drugs. Again, they didn't care because it wasn't their money. Within a year or two of a free market system, 90% of the people were using generic drugs because they got to keep the savings. After all, that's what happens when you buy a car or a computer. If you spend less, you get to keep the money. You get to keep the savings. And the third one, the third one is the environment. What we see is a lot of young people are concerned about the environment. And if you take out a globe and look at the globe, you will see that wherever there's bigger government, there's more pollution. Wherever there's more freedom, there's less pollution. When people are free to come up with better technology, when they have a motive to do so, then we see much better, we see a much cleaner environment.
Okay, just to sum it up, I just want to make sure if I got you correctly. So number one is foreign policy, ending wars. Two, enforcing free market, and three, the environment. If I'm correct?
Well, number two would be free market and healthcare. So, and I don't have a particular order for those three. So, but healthcare, environment, and bringing the troops home.
Okay, so no, I brought the order because that's how we talked about.
That's how I listed it correctly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
okay.
yeah, I should have made that more clear. I should have made that more clear that these are the top three issues, and I basically talk about them as the top three issues without giving numbers to them.
So the environment, what you picked up, is very important because, as you noticed, in state of Maine, because most of the economy is based on fishing and lobster market or so, they are also capable keep the environment working for them because they know if they take everything out, there's nothing for them to go for next generation. So for many years they come up with something that they can do their business as an environment can work.
May I interrupt? Because this is one of my favorite topics, and what you're speaking of is tragedy of the commons. And we hear people complaining about how over in Africa, elephants are being poached for their tusks, and how tigers, certain species of tigers, are becoming extinct, and we need the government to step in. Actually, it's the government that's causing the problem. Most of these lands are either government-owned lands or they're kind of like really nobody owns them, and so nobody's protecting them. If it were a private company, private land, somebody would be protecting it. And the analogy I like to give is, how often have you heard of a farmer going out to his backyard, shooting all of his cows, and saying, wow, I brought home a great kill today. Look at all these cows I got. No, what they would do is they only slaughter, cows or pigs or whatever. They only slaughter as many as they can while keeping the long-term investment. But with tragedy of the commons, there is no incentive for people to make sure that works. And one of my favorite stats with this is from the Soviet Union, which communism didn't work. They were basically starving their people because everybody was working on community farmlands where if you worked harder, it didn't matter. You didn't get anything from it. And so finally, when everybody was starving, the Soviet Union said, you know what? it's okay now to own a little backyard garden. It's okay. Uh, Now, these little backyard individual plots only accounted for 3% of all the farmland, and yet it produced 30% of the food. Again, because people had an incentive.
Absolutely, and it's great that it's good that you're a scientist, so you can have a objective view on this. And this is something that I think it's missing from the environmental debate. The sustainability aspect of it, of everyone who's that business, is never mentioned. Now, if you listen to the debate, it seems that we are just, like human beings are just, ravaging and killing and destroying everything. But if that was the case, we would have been, defeated life of our own species, years ago. But there's a big element of sustainability here that's never mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Which is why I like to give those examples of sustaining, sustaining the elephants, and also to deal more directly with pollution. If you recall, we had the Gulf oil spill some years back, and a lot of people said, see, that's the problem when you have greedy companies. We need government to step in. Actually, here's another example of government stepping in and making the problem worse. What the government had done is they had put a cap on the liability. So the company didn't have, any strong motive to keep something like that from happening. Now, if the government had not put a cap on it, if these people drilled and had to have private insurance, one or two things would have happened. Either the private insurance company would have said, you know what, this is too risky. Looks like there might be a spill, so we're not going to insure you, in which case they couldn't have drilled because, they would have been held liable. But secondly, let's say the insurance company said, okay, sure, we'll insure you. I guarantee you what would have happened is that insurance company would have been out there visiting every week, every month, whatever, inspecting, because they don't want to pay a claim, because it's up to them to, they're the ones who would have to pay out the money. So they have a profit motive for making sure there is no spill. What we had no profit motive for to keep any spill. So that would be an environmental example of, basically tragedy of the commons. The company just had no profit motive to not pollute.
What your platform and campaign offers that could attract likely voters from the two most classic political parties like Democrats and Republicans?
What's the part of my platform? What? I'm sorry?
What your platform and campaign could offer to likely voters in two more classic parties like Democrats and Republicans to join you and vote for you?
Oh, well, really, it's the same message for everybody. And let me point out, a lot of people think that libertarians tend to draw mainly from the right. Actually, we draw equally from the right and left, but we get most of our votes from the independents. And right now, statistically speaking, it looks like there's about 40 million people who are already libertarian leaning, but they just haven't either heard of the party or they don't know enough to join it, and they don't see us as an option. So what we need to do is we need to show them how, if you want affordable health care, if you can't pay your mortgage because you can't afford your health care, if you want safe streets, if you don't want rioting in the street, any of the problems that are going on. And sometimes people ask me for my elevator pitch, what's the one thing you would tell somebody? And my response is, well, I would tend to ask the person a question. Either I would say, what's important to you? Or I would ask them, do you think government is too big or too small? And rarely does somebody say government's too small. So I basically like to tailor my message, but the beauty of the libertarian message and the beauty of the Jo Jorgensen message is it doesn't matter what topic it is, we have a better solution than the federal government.
Just quick follow-up. excuse me, quick two follow-ups on that. You said we need to reach out better. You mean Libertarian Party. What do you propose that this outreach becomes more and more to independent voters or likely voters leaning to Libertarian?
Well, that's what we're doing now. We've got a wonderful social media campaign. Even we have been overwhelmed with the number of volunteers that are signing up. And what's exciting is not all of our volunteers are libertarian. We're getting a great number of non-libertarians who are saying, we just don't want the two old choices. And of course, the media has been calling them two old rich white guys who are competing for it. And there are a lot of people saying, wow, here's somebody different in so many ways. And so because of that, we are getting attention, and we are getting just so many non-libertarians signing up.
Just a quick follow-up, because it's related to campaign and also what you said. At the beginning, you said, you prefer less federal government and involvement in issues so that, private citizens can take care of themselves. I just wanted to give it some kind of a more in-depth view, since it's relevant now and something is on the news since this morning, the defunding of the police department in Minneapolis. As a libertarian, and your view, is it a compatible thing to say defund the police as a less government involvement, or how do you go about it in this situation like this?
Well, libertarians have the general platform that we need police, courts, and military, and that it's okay for the government to fund and run those. So of course it's okay to fund a police department. On the other hand, I am running for a federal office, and one of the problems we have with government is we have federal government, including the president, getting into things they shouldn't be getting into. So I would say that the police issue right now, that this is a local issue, and I will let them work it out. So if I were president right now, no, I wouldn't say we need to do something. I would just say it's a local issue and let's let them take care of it. I would only step in if there was egregious rights being violated. For instance, when we had George Wallace standing on the steps, not allowing blacks into the school. Yes, of course, the federal government needed to be involved because people's rights were being taken away from them. So right now, it's a wait see, and I would, and that's one of the great things about the Libertarian Party is it's not just all these massive government entities overlapping and getting involved with each other's business. So, that's something that somebody running for a local office would be should be answering.
We almost running out of time, but may I ask one last question?
Absolutely.
Okay. How do you view your rivals in this presidential candidate, incumbent President Donald J. Trump and Vice President Joe Biden?
I view them as both big government. And one of the reasons that the polls got it wrong, that so many people were surprised that Donald Trump was elected, was that they didn't poll people who had either never voted or people who hadn't voted in 20 years. And these people were saying, we've had enough of big government. We've had enough of the same old, same old. We want somebody different. We want an outsider. So they elected Donald Trump. But what they got was they did get the same old, same old. They got bigger government. Trump said that he was going to eliminate the deficit. The deficit is actually increasing. So what I want to do is to reach those Donald Trump voters who hadn't voted it in a while and say, you know what you were looking for is absolutely right. We do need a better system. We do need an outsider, somebody who can come in and fix the mess. But now, if Donald Trump as a Republican couldn't fix it, as being an outsider, keep in mind, he didn't have 40 years of political favors. If Donald Trump couldn't fix it, no Republican can fix it. So people should be looking towards the Libertarian Party. And
I
thank
know.
you so much, and really have a good day.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.